around the Supreme Court, where we are still awaiting an official announcement coming from Attorney Theodore Te, the spokesperson of the Supreme Court. Again, it was a vote of 9-5-1. Our sources telling us that's what we're waiting for right now. That's where the spokesperson will be issuing the official statement coming 9-5-1 Court. Let me give you a rundown of what we've reported so far, who we've spoken to. Just a couple of minutes, we got to speak to former Senator Bongbong Marcos on the decision of the Supreme Court. You can imagine that the Marcos family and their loyalists have been waiting for this decision from the Supreme Court. That is a live shot over there in Tacloban City. The senator is there for the third-year anniversary of Typhoon Yolanda. The reason that is why he's not at the Supreme Court together with the Marcos supporters. What he told us, obviously the senator happy of the decision of the Supreme Court. He was thanking the Supreme Court justices and of course President Rodrigo Duterte, who facilitated this and who allowed the burial of his father at the libingan ng mga bayani. He says that the rule of law has finally been upheld. Of course, the next question would be their immediate plans, but the senator quite evasive about this, saying that they will still look into what can happen in the next couple of days. He gave us no date or not even a month on when they plan to bury his father. This is something that the family needs to plan. And he was saying that, of course, his mother would be on top of the planning on the burial of former President Ferdinand Marcos. I asked him about a possible motion for reconsideration that may be filed by the petitioners. David Santos telling us that he spoke to one of the petitioners, former Congressman Nery Colmenares, and he was saying that they will file an MR. The former Senator Bongbong Marcos saying they can do what they wish to do. And finally, I asked him about, what can he say to the petitioners of this case. Senator Marcos saying that, he hopes that the healing will finally begin. Again, Senator Marcos over there in Tacloban, and now live shots. Pro and anti-Marcos groups still gathered there around the premises of the Supreme Court, waiting for an official announcement from the spokesperson of the Supreme Court and also their respective lawyers. There was also earlier statements made, a media briefing by the petitioners, most of them saying that they were shocked and sad by this decision of the Supreme Court. We also spoke to the lawyer of the media briefing by the petitioners, most of them saying that they were shocked and sad by this decision of the Supreme Court. We also spoke to the lawyer of the media from the petitioners. I asked him if they would file a motion for reconsideration, and he said that they first need to read into the ruling of the Supreme Court justices. Our correspondents are on the field. Angela Limario, David Santos, and Ruth Cabal will be bringing us the latest happening there at the Supreme Court. Let's talk to a political analyst, Ed Tayo. He joins us on the line right now. Sir, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Pinky. It's
Sir,
a sad day for us today.
I was going to ask you about your feelings, your thoughts on this ruling of the Supreme Court. Professor Tayo, go ahead.
This is very saddening, Pinky. Saddest day, not only for Philippine democracy, but for the Philippine nation. The Filipino people is definitely going to grieve again after being ruled by a dictator for more than 20 years and getting nothing out of it, and again dividing the whole country for this decision to have the dictator interred in what's supposedly a place for not only heroes but principled men of the country.
We can only really speculate right now, Professor Tayo, on the decision on the fine print of the decision of the Supreme Court justices. But how do you see it? How do you think why the vote went the way it did?
Well, last night I was already trying to ask around what to expect of the Supreme Court decision. But the Supreme Court decision essentially doesn't say that it's allowing the burial of the dictator. But I suppose the ruling simply says that there is no law prohibiting it, and that therefore there's nothing really that bars any plan to have him interred there. No, essentially, to be honest, Pinky, this is a political decision. No, so it's even a question of propriety on the on the part of the ones who actually have the authority to say who's going to be buried in that place.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned, Professor Tayao, it's a political decision, obviously, the petitioners. Also, a while ago, the women petitioners basically said the same thing, that there was a cause for concern once President Rodrigo Duterte had issued his desire or his order for the former president to be buried at the LNMB. They were saying it's a political decision, hence, if it's a political decision, this is a numbers game.
Exactly the case, Pinky. I wasn't... to be honest, I'm not expecting the Supreme Court to decide on the basis of morals or on the basis of values, on the basis of what the people actually feels, because of course the Supreme Court, as we know, rules on how it interprets what the law says, and I'm not about to fault them for that. So absent a categorical rule saying that these are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 criteria, and not one of these criteria basically falls or applies to the dictator, then therefore it goes without saying that anyone can be allowed interment there, depending only on the authority that decides who goes there and who doesn't. So this is definitely the decision that the president made.
You are understanding this correctly, Professor, that you're saying that the decision of the Supreme Court about being buried. So there is...
Yes.
Okay.
Well, of course, as you've said, we're only second-guessing what the decision of the Supreme Court is yet. No, but that's what I'm expecting, because, again, as I've said, I'm not sure really whether there's a particular law which enumerates a particular criteria as to who goes there and who doesn't. So that's the problem.
You're one of the petitioners, sir.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which part of the petition were you? I mean, there were 6 petitions before the Supreme Court.
The petition with former Senator Harrison Alvarez.
I see. Do you think...
And, when I signed that, I was even asked by those who knows or who knew that, I worked with Senator Bongbong Marcos before as of the Committee on Local Governments. And my answer simply is the fact that, I believe in the argument that the sin of the father is not the sin of the son. In the same manner that the capacity of the son is not the same as the capacity of the father. And so we have to be able to distinguish those two, no? So I have no idea why this is becoming an issue.
Okay. We can, just very briefly, I'd like to read to you. You were saying, I mean, you're one of the petitioners, and yet you're saying that there seems to be merit in the decision of the Supreme Court because of absence of any law. But in that particular AFP regulation, sir, it did say that this regulation prescribes who are not qualified to be interred in the LNMB. And these are personnel who were dishonorably separated, reverted, discharged from the service, and personnel who were convicted by final judgment of an offense involving moral turpitude. How do we explain that, sir, in the case of the former president?
Well, supposedly those provisos are the ones that will apply against the burial of the dictator there. But precisely the point here is what process is established to determine who is qualified and who is not qualified. So perhaps that is one reason why the Supreme Court would have difficulty justifying barring the dictator to be buried there, because there is a precedent, Pinky. No, previous presidents were also interred there. No, and I'm sure, of course, as politicians, no, of course, I'm not about to compare previous presidents with most recent presidents. Perhaps we can just say that, as history would suggest, they are better people, no, than more recent leaders of ours, no. But still, just the same, the question is who makes the decision as to who qualifies and who doesn't qualify. It's an AFP regulation, but is it the authority of the AFP Chief of Staff, or is it the authority of the President as the Commander-in-Chief, or whoever really is in charge of making or has the power to make decisions? Perhaps that is the better question. I
see. So, but that would be, something to look into, Professor, looking forward.
Yes, definitely, Pinky. I'm not just saying that this is a done deal. I suppose that many of those who are really against it would still do something and try to dissuade the Supreme Court. No, but at the end of the day, again, as I've said, no, to my mind, this is simply the political leaders tossing it to the Supreme Court. So that if the Supreme Court rules or doesn't rule, at least they can say that, well, this is the decision and I don't have anything to do about it.
Do you think an MR is in order, sir?
Again?
And a motion for reconsideration. Do you think that's in order?
Dapat. Every recourse should be considered. No, this is not only an issue about the Marcoses. This is an issue about us being Filipinos. This is an issue being us being a democracy, no? And this is us being, more objective, discerning people, so to speak. I mean, it's not only a question of us looking at ourselves. It's also a question of how the world will judge us on the basis of, simply turning a blind eye on what actually happened before and even giving honor to someone who dishonored the country.
So how do you think the international community will see this? Because that's one of the statements made by one of the petitioners as well. It's like they were saying, what kind of signal are we sending out to the international community?
Exactly. Pagtatawanan tayo ng mga yan. Kaya nga, libingan ng mga bayani, ano bang translation niya? It's a place for heroes, no? And the former president is no hero, and there are so many reasons why we should not consider him a hero. And apart from that, he did so much damage to the country as well. So I have no idea really why we have to insist on having him interred there. Okay na yung agreement with former President Ramos.
Yeah,
if he could have been interred in Batak, no, where he is of course really, well respected and even what do you call this, admired and everything.
Revered.
So, dapat doon na lang.
Well, moving forward, what's happening really now is that that's not going to happen.
Pinky, to be honest, hindi ko naramdaman yung martial law, no? Pero ako lang, as an academic and as a Filipino, if you simply reflect on what history says, it doesn't really make sense to have him interred there. I'm sorry.
Well, of course, there are two sides to the story. Obviously, Professor, there are the petitioners and there are the pro-Marcos groups who see him as a hero and one who deserves to be buried at the libingan ng mga bayani. So that's why we're also getting both sides here. But as a last question, Professor.
Yeah, all right.
How do you see this? I mean, some are saying, please correct me if I'm wrong, that this is... I don't know how to put it better, but almost like a test case because, this is an order by President Duterte and something that the Supreme Court justices had to rule on.
Yeah. So, yeah, what's the question?
Parang some are saying that this is a test case of some sort for the Supreme Court justices.
Well, alam mo kasi ganito yan eh. Siyempre, if you're a political leader, you don't want the Supreme Court ruling on something which, you are really certain and what's this, you strongly feel for it. No? But if there is some hesitation or if there is, absence of certainty, you want to ask someone or a second opinion to decide for yourself.
Okay.
No? So, to my mind, that's the only reason. No? Kasi if you look at the previous, I couldn't remember exactly, but there were some projects of former President Ramos and former President Noynoy Aquino, and the decision of the Supreme Court in many of these projects which were elevated to the Supreme Court or raised to the Supreme Court, definitely they didn't like it. No?
Okay.
Pero pagka doon sa mga decision or mga issues na they really feel strong, they don't feel that they should decide on because the weight of the decision will fall on them.
Okay.
It's a welcome development if the Supreme Court rules to their direction.
All right. To Edmund Taya, professor and petitioner, thank you so much for speaking to us, sir. Thank you.
Salamat.
Let's go back now to Anjo Alimario. He's at the Supreme Court. Anjo, what's going on there? It was supposed to be, we were expecting a press briefing at 1:30, and now and then it was moved to 2 o'clock. It's 5 minutes past 2, Anjo.
That's right, PK. We're still inside the Supreme Court briefing room, and as you said, the press briefing up there was supposed to start early in the afternoon, and it's moved to 2. Now it's 2:07, and still it's not here. We reported earlier that Chief Justice Lourdes Sereno is still briefing court spokesperson on the actions taken by the court. There's still, of course, the official announcement from the court as to the court Marcos Berga being a mga bayan. Where sources tell us the voting was 9-5 in favor of allowing Marcos to be buried at the libingan ng mga bayan. And again, thinking the breakdown of votes, you have those who are heard.
We'll get back to Anjo Alimario a little later on. We have a bad signal coming in from inside the Supreme Court. But Anjo is there, and we are awaiting this press briefing. It should start anytime, at least from what I got from what Anjo was saying, that the spokesperson of the Supreme Court, Attorney Theodore Te, is still being briefed by CJ Sereno. That's what I understood. A little later on, we'll get back to Anjo, and again, we'll bring you that press briefing live. Netizens are divided on the hero's burial for former President Ferdinand Marcos on Twitter. This user explains not all those buried in the libingan ng mga bayani are heroes. Another user says no to the burial because it will not heal wounds inflicted by the Marcos government. On Facebook, this netizen says Marcos should be brought home to Ilocos instead to avoid conflict. Meantime, this user says we should learn to forgive and forget so we could be at peace. Our correspondents are there on the field. As we mentioned a while ago, Anjo Alimario still awaiting the press briefing coming from the Supreme Court from the spokesperson, Attorney Theodore Te. But we also have our senior correspondent, David Santos. He's there to cover the anti-Marcos groups, and Ruth Cabal covering the pro-Marcos groups. We've talked to a number of people already from both sides. Let's now go to our senior correspondent, Ruth Cabal. Ruth, what do you have for us?
Yeah, at the moment, the Marcos supporters gathered here outside the Supreme Court are praying the rosary. They say this is to thank the Lord for the blessing, which they're saying was the positive, the result of the Supreme Court decision. But in between, it was a festive atmosphere here. There was a lot of singing, a lot of clapping and cheering. And a while back, Governor Amy Marcos was also here to thank the family supporters. She said she was very happy with the Supreme Court decision, although they have yet to hear the formal announcement. But just the same, She said that they don't have a date yet for when the burial will be held, but they could easily plan this. She's hoping it could be done within the year because she says it will just be a simple burial rite. Also, she said it was something that her father deserved anyway, being a former president and a war veteran. Governor Amy Marcos also said the family is ready to face longer legal battle after they heard that some of the petitioners were planning to file a motion for reconsideration. She thanked the supporters for coming over, especially those who came all the way from their home province in Ilocos Norte. Also, she appealed to their supporters to join the family and even President Duterte in calling for the healing and reconciliation, and they are hoping that the Supreme Court decision to finally bury the former president at the libingan ng mga bayani will bring just that. Thank you.
All right, Ruth, is Governor Amy still there?
No, she left a few minutes ago, but she gave a lengthy interview to